To have success, you must come to understand your CNS, your central nervous system. Without this knowledge, success is very unlikely. Very, very unlikely. I have a theory. I have a masculine theory. And it's anecdotal. It is my experience I'll be sharing in this video. But I believe I'm correct. And I'm going to be positing my theory in reference to Joseph Dispenza's theory or science. Not quite sure. You can tell me. In reference to the CNS and specifically the CFS. So let me add some context. The central nervous system is one of your body's most important systems. Why? Because it controls and coordinates all other systems in your body. Without the aid of the central nervous system, you can digest your food. You can void your bladder. You couldn't even move your body and your heart could not beat. You couldn't even blink your eyes without the CNS. So you can think of the nervous system as the electrical wiring that runs the machine of your body. Now, inside this closed system is cerebral spinal fluid, CSF. That's filtered from the blood in your brain. This fluid bathes the spinal cord and the brain, and it's responsible for giving the CNS buoyancy. I like to describe it as it lubricates your nervous system, or it better insulates your nervous system. It acts as a cushion to protect the brain and spinal cord from trauma, and it flows in various rivers and paths to transport nutrients and chemicals to different parts of the nervous system all over the body. By its very nature, this fluid acts as a conduit to enhance electrical charges in the nervous system. Okay, pause. In my understanding, the chemical nature of the CSF is very, very similar to seminal fluid. I am of the opinion that when an individual is sexually continent and celibate, he is no longer taxing his sexual fluids. The body typically takes these fluids from the CFS. What does this mean? I am of the opinion that when you are continent, you have more CSF, meaning your nervous system, your brain and your spinal cord is better enveloped, insulated, and nourished by cerebral spinal fluid. Cerebral spinal fluid contains phosphorus, lecithin, which is a protein, cholesterol, iron. It's very, very rich in minerals, nutrients, and it nourishes the nervous system. I don't believe it would be a stretch of the imagination to say that if you're continent and if you had more of this fluid, that your nervous system and your brain would act, behave, and function better, which might be the source of many of the benefits that you have heard on this practice. Now, I'm going to introduce something called the sacrocranial pump, or Joseph Dispenza and Joseph is going to introduce the craniosacral pump. And what I believe is a powerful transmutative practice for those individuals who may be still having some challenges in this journey. Okay. Let's go to the sacrum. Every time you inhale, the sacrum bone flexes back slightly. And every time you exhale, it flexes forward just a little bit. These movements are very, very subtle. You wouldn't be able to distinguish them unless you're in a deep meditative trance. Okay? Micro movements. And at the same time you inhale, the sutures of your skull, the joints between the individual plates of your skull, which fit together like a jigsaw puzzle, open up just slightly, very, very slightly. As you exhale, they close back up. The movement of your sacrum back and forth as you slowly breathe in and out, along with the sutures of your skull opening and closing, propagates a wave within the fluid of this closed system. And it slowly pumps that CSF fluid up the spine all the way to the brain, passing through 4 chambers called cerebral aqueducts or ventricles. If you were to tag one molecule of cerebrospinal fluid and follow it from the base of the spine all the way up to the brain, and then all the way back down to the sacrum, you would see that it would probably take 12 hours to make a complete circuit. So essentially, you flush your brain twice a day with CSF. Now, we'll share the book and the page. I'm on page 125 of Becoming Supernatural by Joseph Dispenza, and I will share a little figure that describes the process or illustrates the process that I have just described. So, here it is. You can see the movement of CSF from the sacrum bone all the way up to the brain, round and back down again. You can also see the sutures in the skull, which open and close in tandem to how you breathe, and also how the sacrum flexes and extends in relation to this breathing pattern. So here's an invitation by Joseph and an invitation by me. So think about what would happen if you contracted the intrinsic muscles of the perineum, which is your pelvic floor, the muscles used for intercourse and elimination, and you locked them down. And then while they were locked down, you contracted the lower and the upper abdominal, squeezing and contracting those muscles against the sacrum and against the lumbar spine. Essentially, you'd be moving that cerebrospinal fluid into the nervous system, up the spine. Each time you tighten the muscles of those centers, the fluid would be forced upwards. Now imagine if you place the attention on the top of the head. Where you place your attention is where you place your energy. Classic quip from Joseph Dispenza. So if you put your attention at the top of the head, that would become your target for moving this energy. Now think about what would happen if you took one slow, steady breath through the nose at the same time, squeezing and holding the muscles in the perineum and the abdomen, all while following your breath up your spine and through your chest, up to the throat and into your brain. You'd be pulling that cerebrospinal fluid all the way up towards the brain. There's a little diagram to show what that looks like. Why am I sharing this with you? It is my theory. Feels like theories are a get out of jail free card. Just make a decision, Joseph. Tell us yes or no. I do this, and I've experienced a lot of success with this. I am of the opinion that this practice moves stagnant CSF fluid around the lumbar regions of the spine, which can have a pressuring effect around the pelvic floor, which can induce emotions and thoughts of lust, desire, sexual frustration, and a typical way that one might relieve that pressure. This is a nervous effect. It's a nervous and it's a chemical effect. Therefore, I believe the antidote to relieve this pressure is found in the practice that I've just described to you. I would also add a movement in flexing the sacrum and the head. So you would, it's very difficult for me to show here, but if you're flexing the head this way, so when you're breathing in, the head is coming up and you're flexing the sacrum back. So I would stick my bottom out this way. And then it will come forward, exhale, chin comes down, and then the hips, the sacrum, the pelvic bowl comes underneath. Some people call this spinal breathing, kundalini breathing, testicle breathing. Very, very similar. Whilst you're doing that motion in tandem with the breathing, you contract your pelvic floor, which squeezes the sacrum, right? So if it squeezes the bottom of the sacrum and the cerebrospinal fluid is inside that closed circuit, what's going to happen? Fluid's going to go up. If you then contract the muscles, not just the core is a very, very big muscle, but I mean, abdomen might be the best way to describe it. You contract and lock down those muscles as well. And you're continuing to push that fluid up, up, up as you breathe in, and you're pushing it into the brain. Therefore, relieving the pressure of the cerebrospinal fluid, which is accumulated as a consequence of abstinence. In Vedic terminology, they have these things called bandhas. Bandhas, right? Bandha, bandhas. You have Mula bandha, you have another bandha in the diaphragm, and you have another bandha in the throat, right? They're called locks, and essentially they're contractions to move energy up. So Mula bandha is when you contract the pelvic floor. It's called the root lock or the sexual lock. The diaphragm bandha, which is the contraction of the abdomen and the muscles around the diaphragm, which contract against the spine, again, moving that energy, prana. You could even call this bioelectrical energy. That might be a more scientific way to describe it. You're moving bioelectrical energy, sexual energy up the spine. And then the throat bandha, you bring the chin here, and you're locking, and you're using the tongue as well. You're pushing the tongue up against the palate flat. And you're pushing all that energy up into the brain. You'll feel this if you do this, by the way. Start slow. Be sensitive towards what's happening. Be receptive towards how you feel. That'll be my greatest advice with this. And if you want to read this in detail, again, this is Joseph Dispenza's Becoming Supernatural. On page 126 is the description of the movement of cerebrospinal fluid, which flushes the brain. Should I say it? I guess I'll have to say it. And then again, these are just theories. Speak soon.